One of my favorite parts about BreyerFest is the reveals. I really love before they happen too and speculating on what we might see. This year will be Breyer's 36th fest. Last year was a sort of festiversary, the 35th BreyerFest, but this year's the company's 75th anniversary, and that's a pretty big deal. We're seeing themes of diamonds in the regular line, so I can't help but think we might see it in this year's variations. The BreyerFest blog has been featuring neat aspects of the company's and the hobby's history, so perhaps we'll see variations tying into releases from Breyer's past. A post in the BreyerFest blog used a lot of exciting words to hype up this year's fest, so I'm eager to see how it plays out. Real fast and same as always, I do not have insider secrets. All of this is guessing and just for fun. Nothing here is real. Okay, before we talk variations, I wanted to look at recent variation history to try and get an idea of what we might be in for this year. Because we all like patterns, I started with festiversaries and anniversaries. Of the last 3 BreyerFest anniversaries, 2 had a lot of variations, where our most recent had just a couple. Looking at company anniversaries, the 70th had a small variation year, and the 65th didn't have any. If you fan this time laid out consecutively, however, you'll notice something. 24 was a quiet year. 23 was big with 50-50 splits and small 10% of the run variations. 22 was quiet with typical splits. 21 was big and wonderful and offered variations across every offering with small runs in the mix. And 20 was quiet. I'm hoping that every other year being big like that means this year will give us a lot to shout about. For run numbers, Breyer really could do anything, but I thought of a couple ideas for how they might break down if they kept the anniversary numbers in the quantities. Here are the current run numbers, and I broke out runs by 70-piece micro runs, large runs of 1950 pieces, smaller runs of 750 pieces, and large runs that are 75% of the total. The micro runs obviously leave a lot of runs to be split, either in half or some other way. This method is fine for those who manage a micro, but can also make a lot of collectors sad because they might never get one as secondhand prices get really high. If all the SRs are split again in some fun way and micros still happen, I wouldn't mind. Micros to me are all part of the fun. The large runs of 1950 pieces leave small runs for each SR that feel both reasonably obtainable secondhand and still large enough that your odds might be good. The 1950 could still be split in half and would give people a variation of under 1,000 pieces. I like this option a lot. The 750 small runs spread the fun around a little more, giving each SR a variation in quantities similar to CC lottery pieces. The runs could even be split again from here for typical variations like mains, tails, and color. The large runs that use a 75 to 25% split leave enough of the original pieces that you're still likely to get it if that's your favorite, but also provide some smaller run variants that feel special. Personally, I'm hoping we see loads of variations and even smaller runs within the runs that are already split. I hope there are fun colors, thoughtful nods to Breyer's history, and exciting decorator pieces. Here are the special runs again, and I'll go through variations I think would be fun in the order the SRs were revealed on the BreyerFest blog. Get this party started. I feel like there's a lot of room to play with this girl. She was revealed in matte, and we know reveals don't mean anything now as far as finish split, seeing as we got an unprecedented finish variation last year. So she could come in gloss. Models with whites are where we typically see color variations though. We've already got Beachcomber, so I don't think Palomino. A bright bay might be cute, and I think it's different enough from Victoria. But a sort of sorrel color as a nod to Breyer's 1960s sorrels would be really cute. We also saw that when this year's VIP packs were revealed, she's one of the pins. And we did learn that in a couple of past fests, Breyer revealed some variations in the VIP set. So she could come in a bright, sparkling blue reverse pinto, like the pin. This year, though, the other pins are a limited edition and are celebration horse, which, theoretically speaking, should not have variations like this. So this set might just be a fun use of colors. If we did get a decorator variation, I would love to see a silver hollow diamond dust pinto to tie into the theme. Of all these variations, I would love to see the little sorrel girl and definitely the diamond pinto. Let the good times roll. This beautiful guy's details page says specifically finished in a delicious gloss, so hopefully Breyer sticks to that. I admittedly loved the matte Sorry Not Sorry even more than the glossy last year, but I know people who saw him revealed as glossy wanted that glossy and were not very pleased to get him matte. But with Breyer, you never know. He could come in matte. This mold also offers mane tail variations, but Breyer, if you're listening, folks also like their manes and tails. Which reminds me, we did get an email previously from Breyer with a mane tail variation reveal, which might mean we won't see that in this guy. So if we consider colors, as color splits tend to happen where there are spots, I don't think we'll see a lighter buckskin since this sooty color is so pretty, and lighter would be so close in color, and we've got a Palomino in the lineup, which is nice and golden. I don't think he'd be a black leopard because of party. Maybe a fiery chestnut? If he comes in a decorator color, blue as a nod to Copenhagen would be fun. Of the options I thought of for this guy, I'm honestly liking that light buckskin. And I think the Copenhagen as a small run would be excellent. Good times and great friends. Marin full sets don't often see variations, but it is a special anniversary and not often doesn't mean never. I think it would be fun to splash them both. If there was some sort of split, I hope people get to keep their gloss, and instead maybe we see a glossy shaded bay, like the old running mare, and a honey bay full as a nod to Path. If there is a small run deco variation, I leaned into the running mare history and tried a charcoal on Mom and made her baby Alabaster. Of these variations, I'd love to see the shaded and the honey bays. A small run of the decos would be fun too. To the ties that bind us. I love silver. I love Wedgwood blue. I think, though, that I wish this design was reserved either for BreyerFest only, or only used in the anniversary regular run releases, not both. The decorator does not often see a variant. Even in our last high variations year, Nemea did not get a variation. So it's possible this guy is left as is. Then again, he might come glossed. A Wedgwood appy might be nice. Breyer seems pretty fond of this silhouette thing though, so I'm not sure if they'd cancel it out with a regular blanket. If it were changed, a normal Wedgwood silver as a variant would be amazing. I think though my favorite idea would be a pearly white with a little bit of holographic sheen. I see it as a nod to both the first release of silver and the Treasure Hunt series Pegasus Prize. Of the silvers, I honestly would adore a plain Wedgwood. I also really would love a pearly appy. YOLO. He might also be our finished split in gloss. That does look an awful lot like Wells from 2023 though. I'm kind of hoping that the email revealing our Palo guy is a clue that we won't see a mold variation on this guy, because that could bring Laredo into the mix, and he's just not as well loved as the Vanner. What makes me nervous is the key word in his blog post reveal, swap. Maybe they'd outfit him with the Laredo maiden tail, which we haven't seen on the Vanners since Dagdia in 2016. I like the idea of him being a much softer, lighter gray with a chalky finish. But this might be too close to the original. I think he's a perfect candidate for a small run of Silver Charm, or a deco in vintage Splatter Dapple Gray. Of all these variations, I kind of like that Dagdia. He looks soft and sweet. I also honestly love the idea of a chalky base light gray, but I'm not sure if making these variations different enough would be straightforward, or if some light ones might end up a little dark and look like the original, or if some of the originals might lean a little light. I do like it though. I also really love the idea of a vintage-inspired Splatter Dapple Gray variation. Seize the day surprise. I'll talk here about colors, but share my top votes for mold at the end of this video. The last 2 years we've gotten 5 realistic colors plus 1 decorator. In 2022 we got 6 colors plus the deco. It would be nice to see that again, the 7 total colors. Amanda and I were on the same wavelength when we thought it would be neat to see a color to represent each decade of Breyer history. Recent years would offer realistic colors, and older years would be fun decorators. I was thinking we might see another clearware like the new 112 Arabian Mare, something with color shift sparkle as a nod to diamonds. We got a green one this year, and the last time we had a clearware surprise was in 2019, and it was also green. Maybe instead of a chestnut Sabino, like this year, we get a solid chestnut. Maybe instead of a leopard appy, we get a blanket. I'd also like some fun modified colors like smoky black or a gruya or another rose gray. We could see a Palomino Pinto this time, or maybe a splash, and anyone with unique markings is welcome in my book. I'd love cat tracks and bendor spots and a badger face. While it might not be popular, I think a run of a white surprise would be neat. I do hope we see average quantities within the surprise, but also would love smaller variations. Something outside like the typical glossy color being in lower quantity, but a variation on a color like a splash or a diamond dust pinto in a specific color, like a variation within that variation. It would also be pretty amazing if Breyer snuck a very small micro run into the surprises. Hats off to you. He could be glossy. I almost don't even want to touch this color because it's so beautiful. But if they give him a color variant, I think a champagne dun would be really nice and tie into the theme with champagne. Something I didn't realize, Old Timer has never, at least not that I could find, been issued in a fanciful decorator color aside from one auction model in 2023. One of my friends was thinking he'd be really cute as a birthday cake pink, and he would. I was thinking he'd be amazing in the Carpe Diem colors, like the Sherman Morgan that was mentioned in his blog post reveal. Of these ideas, I really would like to see the Champagne Dun and the Sunset Carpe Diem deco. Future is bright. This handsome guy stirred a lot of excitement with that long mane, and then a lot of chatter when an email from Breyer was sent with what appears to be a mane variation. This is his debut year with long hair. Why take that away? If he is the mane split, he'll be a little less swishy. He could also be glossed. Because we've got a gruya and because we've got a sooty buckskin, it's hard to see any other unique coat colors for him. But because his name is Future is Bright, I could maybe see this guy as a creamy light Palomino. Again, that color is close to the original, and it feels weird doing a color variation on a run without recognizable markings. To me, this guy is just begging for a small run of gold charm decos. Of those ideas, I wouldn't mind a creamy Palomino, or maybe the gloss, and maybe that gold charm, just as long as they all have their brand new pretty manes. Life's a journey. The non-equine often doesn't see variations either, though it has seen a variation more often than the mare in full. I can't quite see this little guy in gloss. The Lassie mold has also not been a decorator, so maybe a black and white version with color shift iridescence like the black Uffington? And as a nod to one of the first Western horse colors? The Western horse was mentioned in his blog post, by the way. I could see him in a red merle, though, as another lovely shade that Leslie could have designed. I always love her colors. Beyond that, I don't really see this guy as having a variation, either large or small. My surprises guest list looks a lot like everyone else's. These 14 molds are the technically qualified candidates for the year, but I say that with air quotes. They're based on confirmed releases up to this point and information gathered from past releases and patterns that we've seen. Personally, I'm taking Troubadour off first due to a recent leak. The leak is not confirmed, and things could change, so he may pop back up as the surprise. I'm also removing Sage, as we've got a Mustang mare in the SRs. I would remove Fireheart for the same reason, but there's a big reason I'm letting him stay. I'm removing Shannondale, Vermeer, and Goffert, as we've got a fluffy, feathery guy in the SRs. I like Weather Girl, but if I had to make another cut, I'd remove her based on the pattern that a surprise has also never been a treasure hunt model. She's also quite tippy, and that's not really favored in the hobby. This leaves Vallegro, Totalis, Pam, the Andalusian mare, the Lipizan mare, Constantia, Fireheart, and the Marwari. I can see Constantia being the surprise, as she'd fit in the SR line without crowding any of the other breeds. She's got no new releases, was in the auction last year if you still consider that part of the pattern. Her last BreyerFest use was 2023, and she's a recent mold. She might not be the surprise because of her stand. A stand doesn't eliminate a model, but a surprise model has needed a stand once in the history of BreyerFest, and I heard it did not go well as far as damages and missing pieces. Personally, I really like this mold, and I think she's a beautiful horse. I wonder if she might be too unique as far as breed and pose to be a surprise? I'm not sure. Pam. I love this old girl. There is so much history and sentimentality in the hobby with this mold. She really would make an incredible surprise. I don't think we'd see the real Pam be the surprise, but if Breyer has gained rights to molds she was based on, and we have a new scan for the stablemate version, that horse debuting in 1/9 plastic at a company anniversary fest would be incredible. There are no Arabians in the special runs this year, so adding her would make a nice breed roster. There is an Arabian in the LEs though, and I have no idea what the rights are behind releasing a giant run of 1/9s on this or similar molds. Her sister Fam is in the auction, which might further reduce her odds, and she is being released this year in the Stablemate Club. I don't know if 132s have any sway on the use of their 1/9 version, but if they do, she wouldn't make the cut this year. Vallegro won the Mares in Black Bracket Challenge as being the 2025 surprise guess. His mold is well liked in the hobby, and even in Pirouette, he's a pretty versatile mold as far as breeds. It's also his 10-year anniversary since his debut in 2015, which would be a really nice tie-in. The only thing I could find stopping him might be that little stand, and production being absolutely certain that nearly 8,000 of them made it intact into their bags without being broken or damaging the model. Totalis is also a versatile mold and has been used as a mare and a stallion, so could be either as the surprise. He was in the auction last year, and he was a web special 2 years ago. His last use for BreyerFest was in 2022, so enough time has passed that he could reappear in 7 different colors. That little stand might be an issue for him. It's come off in a lot of hooves, it cracks easily, and it goes missing when people unwrap their models. The Andalusian mare would make a nice surprise, and her size and shape feel like a good fit. She was in the auction last year and hasn't seen a fest since 2020. It is also her anniversary this year, and a mold having an anniversary during an anniversary fest is sort of perfect. She was a Vintage Club Gambler's Choice, however, and I haven't figured out yet if prior Gamblers models of any variety just don't become surprises. The Lipizan mare checks the boxes as being a surprise this year. She's a sweet little mold and isn't disliked. She was a recent BreyerFest model of sorts, but not too recently. She doesn't have any current releases and hasn't been in the regular line since 2021, so she deserves a chance at use. She was a recent web special, and I don't know if that DQs her or is too recent a use or not. She was a Gambler's Choice model too, but that was back in 2019 and in only 2 colors. I wrote that she's petite, and she is, but she's not pony-sized, so these 3 bullets might not mean anything at all. The Marwari could also be our surprise, technically speaking, but I have a feeling all the technicals aren't really considered much, and mold use might be closer to a whim. He does have mane tail options, which makes variations within the surprise fun, but I speak for myself when I say if he's ever the surprise, I do hope specifically for this mold and not the common ears alternate. He's had a really good life in BreyerFest as a prize, celebration horse, special run, and auction models. He hasn't had any recent regular line uses, not since 2015, so he's overdue for another use. I don't know if 10 years outside the regular line works against him though, and does being a prize just last year DQ him? Or his use as a 24 web special? Is he too niche of a breed? I love him. I would buy many surprises if it were him. I guess we'll see. Lastly, I still have Fireheart up here because I could see Breyer doing something clever with his colors, like making dads for a certain little chestnut foal. He is a popular mold and will likely be our surprise eventually. His stablemate is not within the BreyerFest offerings this year, and something I recently noticed, he was a first come, first served web special 2 years ago. In 2021, Lafayette was a web special 2 years before Hamilton became the surprise. In 2022, we got Chadwick, a web special 2 years before Emerson was the surprise. And in 2023, we got Bolero. This could be nothing at all, but it's the main reason I left him here despite all of these no's. There are Mustangs in the SRs already. He's a rendering on the clock for a 25 Vintage Club release, which might have zero significance, but he's, and I say this in air quotes, being used in a same year release. His stablemate is a current year release, and he's had a lot of recent BreyerFest use, which works for, and I think against, molds. Really, any of the molds I took off could still be the surprise. The surprise for this year might not even be on this list. There is a pattern until there isn't, and Breyer could do something completely different this year than any of us are expecting. Kat from Breyer said once, "I appreciate that everyone thinks they have us figured out. There is not a pattern." Full disclosure, that might only be referencing the special Breyer West model, as that was part of the dialogue surrounding this quote, but the conversation was touching on BreyerFest too. In 2024, Breyer did variations as a fest-specific percentage, in this case 35, which I don't think had been done before. They also gave us a matte variation after a glossy reveal, which hadn't happened before. In 2023, they gave us our first Mare full variation with an entirely different mold, which hadn't happened before. And in 2021, we got our first VIP ticket package. I think they might give us something brand new this year that we haven't seen before, and I'm excited to see what it might be. On Mares in Black episode 125, Heather specifically mentioned this year's BreyerFest and hoping for confirmation of greatness when Kat cut in with, "It's gonna be lit." Lastly, my friends in Spec Chat group always get my creative gears turning for these videos, so thanks to them for the consistently fun conversation and letting me blather on about my ideas. Thanks also to the people behind IDYB. I get the majority of my information and images there and would be completely lost without that resource. I know a few hobbyists have taken the helm there, one of them being Alita with Triple Mountain. I plan to make a BreyerFest purchase from Triple Mountain as my virtual wish I was shopping the Clarion purchase as a small gesture of gratitude. I can't imagine the time, money, and resources it takes to keep a website like IDYB going. I hope everybody gets exactly who they're after this year. Thanks so much for watching, safe travels, and happy BreyerFesting.